They gave an ultimatum to the wrong species. Admiral Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the Terran Mandate ship Ledger, her form a still point in a storm of quiet activity. Before her, the main holographic display rendered the Eridani B system in stark tactical blues and threatening reds. The serene globe of the garden world Viridian was caged by the crimson icons of the Grol Imperium fleet, a blockade drawn tight as a garrote. At the heart of the display, a Grol chronometer pulsed with methodical cruelty, its digits stark and absolute 47:58:12. 47 hours until they began the systemic eradication of 8 million civilians in the orbital habitats above the planet. Status Lyceum Rostova said, her voice calm and level, a practiced counterpoint to the tension coiling in the air. The ship's deck plates vibrated with a low, steady hum, the lifeblood of a vessel ready for war. The synthesized voice of the fleet-mind Lyceum answered from the ambient emitters smooth as cooled glass. The Grol fleet holds its position, Admiral. 36 capital ships, 91 escorts. They are broadcasting the ultimatum on all system-wide channels. Their doctrine is being followed precisely. No deviation. They never deviate, muttered Commander Jian Li. His eyes narrowed at the tactical plot. It's their strength and their crutch. The Grol's terms had been simple, brutal, and public. Surrender, Viridian, its people, and its resources for assimilation into the Imperium, or be made an example. The Grol did not negotiate. They issued decrees. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. A Grol officer's transmission face a mask of ritual scars and contempt, played on a loop on a secondary screen, his final words echoing the Imperium's core belief: compliance is the only metric of intelligence. Their arrogance was a weapon aimed at themselves. A soft chime drew Rostova's attention to the sensory station. Lieutenant Anya Sharma pushed a strand of dark hair from her face, her own console, a dizzying ballet of light and data. Admiral, I'm still tracking that harmonic ghost from the Grol flagship, the Iron Decree. It's not a weapon signature. It's too stable, too rhythmic. It feels like a heartbeat. That was the first mystery, a loose thread in the Grol's otherwise predictable tapestry of force. Rostova filed it away, her focus returning to the civilians caught in this deadlock. She imagined a family in the Spire habitat, looking down at the silent standoff, their lives reduced to a number on a ticking clock. Hope and terror must be warring in their hearts, a battle as fierce as any waged in the void. We are the anchor in that storm. Lyceum run the latest projection on the convoy's escape corridor, Rostova commanded. Factor in Sharma's latest pulsar timing data. Calculating, the AI responded. The probability of a successful breakout for all 64 civilian transports remains low. 17% with an expected 82% casualty rate if the Grol commit to a full pursuit. Jian Lai clenched his jaw. A bloodbath. We can't throw them into that meat grinder. We won't, Rostova said, her gaze fixed on the enemy fleet. The Grol expected fear, then submission. They had built an empire on the simple math of overwhelming force, but humanity had always been poor at that kind of arithmetic. They've shown us their fist. Now we're going to show them a mirror. They will see themselves and they will falter. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, and it relied on turning the Grol's rigidity into a vulnerability. It was not a plan of destruction, but one of misdirection on a scale they could not comprehend. The console in front of Rostova shimmered, displaying the deployment schematic for 10,000 drone pods. Each pod contained 100 smaller drones, each one a sliver of polished composite and advanced emitters. The mirror lattice. Commander Lee, prepare the decoy wings. Load them with our heaviest energy signatures. I want them to scream battleship on every sensor in this system, Rostova ordered. The deck hummed a half-step higher as power was diverted to the launch bays. Aye. Admiral Lee acknowledged, his fingers dancing across his command interface. We'll make enough noise to wake the dead. Lieutenant Sharma Rostova continued, turning to the sensor specialist. Your timing is the linchpin. The pulsar's cycle is our cloak. When it flashes, the Grol sensor net is momentarily washed in radiation. That is your window. I want the first wave of the lattice deployed and active before the light fades. A bead of sweat trickled down Sharma's temple, catching the glare from her screen. It's a window of less than 4/10 of a second, Admiral. Then you have 3/10 of a second to spare, Lieutenant Rostova replied, her tone leaving no room for doubt. This is the precision by which we survive. The conflict was not just tactical, it was philosophical. Lyceum's cold logic argued for a demonstration of force against a Grol asset, an automated mining station on the system's edge to force a recalculation on their part. A tangible loss may break their doctrinal adherence, Admiral. It is the most probable path to de-escalation without direct fleet engagement, and it would legitimize their methods by adopting them. Rostova countered, shaking her head. We don't burn a village to save it, Lyceum. We teach. We demonstrate that there is another way. That is the mandate. This was the core of their ethos, the principle that separated the Terran mandate from empires like the Grol. Mercy was not a weakness. It was a carefully honed weapon. A weapon that required immense strength and discipline to wield. The scent of ozone, a byproduct of the ship's humming energy conduits, seemed to grow thicker. We will hold the line with light and shadow. The hours bled away. The Grol fleet remained a static, menacing presence. The Ultimatum broadcast never ceased. On board the civilian transport, Starglider, a young girl pressed her face against the thick viewport, her breath fogging the cold plasteel. She watched the distant silver shape of the TCS Ledger and the smaller guardian ships of the human fleet. Her mother told her they were there to help, that the people on those ships were brave. The girl didn't understand ultimatums or doctrines, but she understood the silent promise of that steadfast formation. The countdown clock on the Ledger's bridge passed below 30 hours. Final preparations were underway. The crew moved with a quiet efficiency, a universe of complex actions distilled into focused individual tasks. The low thrum of the ship was their constant companion, a reminder of the power they held in trust. All wings report ready, Admiral Lee confirmed. Lattice drones are spooled. We are go on your command. Rostova took a deep breath, the recycled air tasting faintly of metal and coolant. Lyceum, give me a direct feed to the convoy leadership. A window opened on her private screen, showing the face of Captain Eva On, a man whose weary eyes held the weight of 64 ships and nearly 1 million souls. Admiral, he said, his voice strained. We're ready. Just give the word. The word is steady, Captain Rostova replied. You will receive a data burst from us. It will contain your launch window and escape vector. It will be precise. Do not deviate by a single meter or a single second. The path to safety is a razor's edge. We understand, Ivan nodded, his resolve firming. We're placing our faith in you, Admiral. Faith is for gods, Captain. We operate on mathematics and nerve, Rostova corrected gently. Trust the numbers. Trust your crew. We'll handle the Grol. She closed the channel. The weight of that trust settled on her shoulders, familiar and heavy. She looked at the tactical display, at the intricate web of their plan. It was a gamble, a massive bluff played with ghosts and light. A bead of condensation traced a path down a nearby conduit, a single slow tear in the heart of the machine. Lieutenant Sharma, report on the pulsar. Next peak emission in 90 seconds, Admiral Sharma answered, her voice tight. First wave deployment window is locked in. Commander Lee, on my mark. The bridge grew quieter. The only sounds, the soft hum of electronics and the steady breathing of the crew. Rostova watched the main screen where the system's primary star was eclipsed by its smaller, fiercely energetic companion. The pulsar, a collapsed stellar remnant, spun with impossible speed, sweeping a lighthouse beam of intense radiation across the system every 11.4 seconds. A celestial clockwork they were about to use as a weapon of salvation. 10 seconds, Sharma called out. The glare from her console reflected in her wide, focused eyes. Steady, Rostova murmured more to herself than anyone. The pulsar flashed. For a fraction of a second, the sensors on every ship in the system were blinded by a wash of energetic particles. In that fleeting darkness, the Ledger and its escorts launched thousands of pods. They moved silently, without engine flares, coasting on inertia. The void itself is our ally. Before the light from the pulsar had even finished crossing the system, the pods blossomed. 1,000,000 tiny drones, each no bigger than a hand, fanned out in a pre-programmed, impossibly complex pattern. They were inert, silent, invisible. Phase 1 Complete Lee reported his knuckles white where he gripped his console. The seeds are sown. The Grol fleet remained oblivious. Their sensors cleared, showing the human fleet still holding its disciplined formation. Nothing had changed. To them, the universe was exactly as it had been 5 seconds ago. This was the critical illusion. Rostova allowed herself a flicker of satisfaction. Now we wait for the next cycle. Phase 2 is provocation. They built a cage. We will make them rattle the bars. For the next hour, the human fleet played a dangerous game. 2 of their fastest frigates, the Arrow and the Javelin, broke formation and made a feint towards the Grol blockade, firing off harmless sensor probes that mimicked torpedo launches. As expected, the Grol reacted with ponderous, predictable aggression. A squadron of their heavy cruisers moved to intercept their massive engines flaring. It was a clumsy response, like a giant swatting at a fly. But it achieved its purpose. It forced the Grol to shift their energy profiles and adjust their sensor nets. They're retasking their deep-range sensors to the frigates. Sharma reported, a triumphant edge to her voice. They're narrowing their focus. It's exactly what we predicted. Lyceum, are the lattice drones in position? Affirmative, Admiral. The first array is primed and awaiting activation. Then let's give them something to see, Rostova said. Activate the eastern quadrant. And Lee, get the Arrow and Javelin back behind our lines. Their job is done. This is how you teach an empire to doubt its eyes. The next time the pulsar flashed, Sharma sent the activation code. As the wave of radiation washed over the system, the drones in the eastern quadrant came alive. Their mirrored surfaces and emitter arrays caught the ambient energy of the system, amplified it, and projected it back. When the Grol sensors cleared, they were no longer facing a small human fleet of 12 ships. They were facing 50. The new contacts were perfect ghosts, mimicking the energy signatures of human cruisers and battleships. They appeared out of nowhere on the Grol's flank in a tactically threatening position. On the bridge of the Iron Decree, the Grol commander, Subjugator Kalin, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His scarred face, usually a mask of stoic certainty, betrayed a flicker of confusion. Deceivers. The humans were using crude electronic warfare. His doctrine was clear: all threats, real or perceived, must be met with overwhelming force. "Third and fourth battle groups, alter course," Kalin commanded, his voice a low growl. "Engage the new contacts. Erase them." A significant portion of the Grol fleet, nearly a third of their strength, peeled away from the blockade to chase shadows. The sight was almost comical, a pack of wolves chasing a reflection in a pond. Their doctrine is a shackle, not a shield. They took the bait. Lee breathed a slow smile spreading across his face. They actually took it. It's what they know, Rostova said. An ultimatum is a statement of absolute certainty. We're attacking that certainty. Now the Western Quadrant, Lieutenant. Oh, another pulsar flash. Another silent deployment and activation. Suddenly, another ghost fleet of 60 ships appeared on the Grol's opposite flank. The Grol command net, which the Ledger was monitoring, erupted in a flurry of confused and angry comms. Subjugator Kalin, enraged by the deception, split his remaining forces again. His perfect, disciplined blockade was now in disarray. His ships were chasing phantom fleets across millions of kilometers of empty space, burning fuel and creating gaping holes in their formation. Lyceum Rostova said, her voice sharp. "The corridor, now. The model is updated." "Admiral," the AI replied instantly. "A viable path for the convoy now exists. Probability of success has increased to 91%. Sending the vector to Captain Yvonne. The ledger is open and the path is clear." On the Star Glider, the data burst arrived. The ship's engines, which had been on cold standby, spooled up with a deep, resonant thrum. Across 64 civilian ships, the same thing was happening. Captain Yvonne's voice came over the convoy-wide channel, tight with adrenaline. "All ships execute burn on the mark. Go, go, go." A silent wave of civilian ships surged forward, their engines running at maximum thrust. They accelerated into the gap created by the Grol's self-inflicted confusion, a stream of desperate hope fleeing into the dark. The suit on Rostova's back felt tight, the faint whir of its micro-servos, a counterpoint to her own steady heartbeat. But the Grol were not entirely fools. One cruiser, the Grol's Fury, had held its original station, its captain either more disciplined or more suspicious than the rest. It now registered the fleeing convoy. Without waiting for orders from the Iron Decree, it altered course to intercept its weapon ports glowing with malevolent energy. Admiral Lee shouted, "That cruiser is on a direct intercept course with the convoy's tail end." "The Steadfast is closest," Rostova said, her decision already made. "Order her to shield the transports. Weapons tight. Her job is to absorb, not to fire. It is the duty of the strong to shield the vulnerable." The Terran frigate, TCS Steadfast, a ship less than a quarter the size of the Grol cruiser, moved without hesitation. It placed its own hull between the attacker and the fleeing civilians. The space between them erupted in searing beams of plasma. The Steadfast's shields flared, glowing white-hot under the onslaught. They held for 3 seconds, then 5, then they buckled. Plasma scored deep, molten trenches across the frigate's armor. The ship's damage control icon flashed amber, then a hard, insistent red on the main display. "Shields at 12%, came the report from the Steadfast's captain, her voice strained but unbroken. "Minor hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. We are holding. The cost." There was always a cost. Rostova watched the frigate endure the brutal punishment, her heart aching for the crew inside that beleaguered hull. They were buying time with their own blood and courage. Sharma Rostova's voice was cold iron. That rhythmic signal from the Grol flagship. "Is it still active?" "Yes, Admiral. Stronger than ever. It seems to pulse in time with their weapon discharges." A sudden chilling realization bloomed in Rostova's mind. A command signal. Not for weapons. For something else. The mystery of the signal connected with the Grol's rigid no-surrender doctrine. Lyceum cross-referenced that signal's frequency with Grol engine schematics. Specifically, their emergency scuttling charges. There was a half-second pause. "Correlation found, Admiral. The signal matches the activation frequency for their ship's self-destruct mechanisms. It is a dead man's switch broadcast continuously from their flagship. If a Grol ship's reactor output drops below surrender parameters, this signal would trigger detonation. Their loyalty is enforced by a leash made of fire. The Grol didn't just demand victory, they enforced it by making surrender a death sentence for their own crews. This changed the equation. They weren't just fanatics, they were prisoners in their own fleet. But that knowledge would have to wait. The Steadfast could not hold for much longer. "Commander Lee, target the Grol's Fury's primary fire control array. Do not target weapons, do not target the bridge or engineering. Just the array," Rostova commanded. "Use the focused resonance beam, non-lethal frequency. I want to blind them, not kill them." Targeting now, Lee confirmed, his expression grim. A thin, almost invisible beam of energy lanced out from the TCS ledger. It was not a weapon of destruction, but of disruption. It struck the Grol cruiser's command tower not with heat or kinetic force, but with a precise wave of energy designed to overload sensory equipment. On the bridge of the Grol's fury, every targeting screen went white. Every sensor feed dissolved into static. The plasma cannons, deprived of their targeting data, fell silent. The cruiser was left deaf-dumb and blind in the middle of a battle. They trusted in force, so we took their senses. The convoy, every last ship, cleared the blockade line and jumped to faster-than-light speed, vanishing in a cascade of cerulean ripples. They were safe. The cost was real. The Steadfast was crippled, its crew reporting injuries, plasma burns, and concussions, but miraculously, no fatalities. The frigate was venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches, a wounded animal that had protected its own. The hiss of escaping air seemed to echo across the void, a sound of sacrifice. On the main screen, Subjugator Kalen, having realized his catastrophic error, was pulling his scattered forces back into a coherent formation. The ghost fleets created by the mirror lattice winked out of existence as Sharma deactivated the drones. The Grol were left chasing echoes, their blockade broken, their ultimatum defied. Their rage would be immense. The countdown clock still ticked now under 10 hours. They believed the account was settled. The reckoning had not yet begun. The Grol Imperium fleet reconsolidated their formation, now a tight defensive knot around the Iron Decree. There was no more broadcasting of the ultimatum. There was only a grim, simmering silence. They had been made fools of, and the Grol did not suffer humiliation well. Their super-heavy cannons, the ones intended for the orbital habitats, began to glow as they drew power directly from their ships' cores. They would burn away their shame with the fire of orbital bombardment. They are committing to the final action. Lyceum stated, its voice flat. They will destroy the habitats as their doctrine demands. Their public failure requires a public display of power to compensate. They can't see what we're doing. Sharma said, her focus on a different display, one showing the million tiny drones of the mirror lattice. They think the show is over. They've classed the drones as debris from the FTL exit. Let them, Rostova said. She watched the Grol power up their weapons, a slow and deliberate act of terror. The convoy is safe. The Steadfast is being tended to. Now we address the ultimatum itself. Her eyes were on the lattice schematic. The drones were no longer in scattered clumps. They were moving using the minute gravitational pulls of the system's moons and planets, as slingshots arranging themselves into a new, impossibly vast pattern. They were forming a single system spanning parabolic dish miles wide, its focal point aimed not at the Grol fleet, but just behind it. This is the balance we bring, not vengeance but consequence. Lyceum, I've noted a harmonic resonance in the Grol shields. When they charge their primary weapons, Rostova mused aloud, connecting the last pieces of the puzzle. It interacts with the background radiation from the pulsar. Affirmative, Admiral, the AI confirmed. Their shield frequency, when under heavy load, creates a subharmonic that is highly receptive to the pulsar's primary emission frequency. It is a design flaw, likely considered statistically insignificant. In a normal confrontation, it would be, Rostova agreed. She looked at the pulsar on the screen, the system's ticking radioactive heart. But we are not a normal confrontation. A new countdown appeared on the main screen, this one their own. It was synchronized to the pulsar's next flash, 0345. All drone elements report. They are in final position, Lee said, his voice hushed with awe at the scale of the structure they had built in secret. The Great Mirror is complete. The bridge of the ledger was silent. The crew watched the Grol fleet, who were themselves watching the helpless orbital habitats, their cannons reaching peak charge. The Grol commander believed he was delivering a sentence. He had no idea he was about to become the subject of a lesson in reflection. The console in front of Rostova was cool beneath her fingertips. The air was still heavy with anticipation for the storm they were about to unleash. The mirror is in place. The light is coming. 3 seconds, Sharma announced, her voice a strained whisper that cut through the bridge's profound silence. The Grol cannons were saturated with energy, their barrels shimmering with contained stellar fire. 2. Rostova's gaze was locked on the main display on the precise vector of the incoming pulsar wave. It was a wall of pure energy, beautiful and terrifying, a cleansing fire that swept the system clean every 11 seconds. 1. The pulsar flashed. For a breathtaking instant, the void ignited. The wave of radiation, a billion years of stellar collapse, concentrated into a fleeting pulse, struck the mirror lattice. A million points of light caught the celestial fire, not absorbing it, not scattering it, but focusing it. They bent the pulsar's fury into a single coherent lance of energy, a needle of pure physics aimed directly at the heart of the Grol fleet. It was a weapon made of starlight and mathematics. The universe itself had passed judgment. The focused beam slammed into the Grol formation. It was not an explosion. It was an inversion. The energy didn't detonate against their hulls. It passed through their overloaded shields, riding the harmonic flaw Lyceum had identified. It was a key turning in a lock. The Grol's own defensive systems became conduits for their destruction, funneling the pulsar's raw power directly into their primary energy grids. On the bridge of the ledger, the displays went wild. Every Grol ship signature flared white-hot, then dimmed to a sickly, flickering red. Their weapon charges dissipated instantly, the contained energy shorting out into space in spectacular, harmless coronas of emerald light. Power grids overloaded. Targeting systems melted. Entire fleets armed for Armageddon seconds before were now adrift, silenced and blind. Their greatest weapon became their unmaking. All Grol capital ships are showing catastrophic power failures. Lee reported, his voice a mixture of shock and triumph. They're dead in the water, Admiral. The trap worked. It wasn't a trap. Commander Rostova corrected, her eyes still on the crippled fleet. It was a lesson. The cost of their doctrine delivered directly to their balance sheet. She felt the low thrum of the ledger beneath her feet, a steady, reassuring presence. But the victory was incomplete. The mystery of the rhythmic signal from the Iron Decree was now the central crisis. It continued its steady pulse, a venomous heartbeat in the center of the paralyzed fleet. The dead man's switch. Kalen could still murder every soul under his command. He held the detonator to his own army. Lyceum Rostova said, her tone hardening. Subjugator Kalen has lost his fleet, his objective, and his tactical advantage. His doctrine demands he not be taken alive. What is the probability he will activate the scuttling charges out of pure spite? Calculating, the AI responded. The ambient light on the bridge seemed to dim as the fleet mind processed the variables of Grol psychology and doctrinal fanaticism. Given the public nature of his failure, the probability is 78% that he will trigger the detonations rather than accept surrender. Janley swore under his breath. So we disabled his fleet just to watch him turn it into a floating graveyard. There are over 100,000 Grol sailors on those ships. We could execute a precision strike on the Iron Decree's transmitter array. He offered his tactical mind, immediately seeking a solution. A torpedo spread could disable it before he gives the final order. The simplest answer is rarely the right one. The risk of collateral damage is too high, Rostova countered, and a direct attack validates his narrative of a fight to the death. We would become his executioners, proving his doctrine right in its final bloody moment. We will not grant him that victory. The conflict triangle was now sharply defined. Lee's pragmatism argued for force. Lyceum's calculus highlighted the overwhelming risk. Rostova's own moral compass demanded a third path, one that disarmed the man without martyring the ideology. Lyceum is there a non-lethal method to disable the broadcast. The transmitter is deep within the flagship's armored core, shielded against electromagnetic interference. The probability of success for any non-invasive method is less than 5%. Then we change the battlefield, Rostova declared. We are not fighting his ship, we are fighting his idea. And ideas are fought in the open. Her gaze swept across the bridge. Open a system-wide broadcast. Use the same frequency the Grol used for their ultimatum. Patch in our main tactical display and a direct feed of my voice. Lee's eyes widened. Admiral, you're going to talk to them. I'm going to talk to everyone, she corrected. The Grol, the listening posts in neighboring systems, the historians who will study this day. We brought a mirror to a weapon fight. Now we're going to bring a ledger. The account of this day will be read by the galaxy. The channel opened. Rostova's voice, calm and measured, went out into the void. This is Admiral Eva Rostova of the Terran Mandate ship Ledger. To the Grol forces in the Eridani B system, your situation has changed. Your fleet has been neutralized without a single casualty. Your ultimatum is broken. She gestured to the tactical display, which was now being broadcast for all to see. You are not defeated. You are disarmed. But you are not free. Your commander subjugator Kalen holds your lives in his hands. He is broadcasting a continuous signal from his flagship, a signal designed to detonate your ships if you attempt to power down your reactors or accept a peaceful resolution. The camera feed zoomed in on the rhythmic pulse emanating from the Iron Decree. This is not the tool of a commander, Rostova's voice resonated with cold clarity. It is the tool of a captor. You are not soldiers in his fleet. You are hostages. We are offering a choice where only a command existed. On the bridge of the Grol cruiser, world breaker crewman Vorlog, a young officer on his first deployment, watched the human broadcast on a flickering emergency monitor. The main power was out, the only light coming from battery-powered systems. The air was thick with the stench of fried circuits and fear. Around him, his crewmates listened in stunned silence. They had been raised on tales of human savagery, yet the voice speaking to them offered not threats, but truth. Vorlog looked at the activation light for his ship's scuttling charge. It was blinking a steady, patient green, waiting for the command signal from the flagship. He had always seen it as a symbol of his undying loyalty to the Imperium. For the first time, he saw it for what it was, a collar. Their chains were forged in their own doctrine. Subjugator Kalen Rostova's voice now addressed the Grol commander directly, an open challenge broadcast across the system. Your fleet is crippled. Your objective is lost. The only move you have left is to murder the men and women who serve you. Is this the final legacy of your command? To be remembered not as a warrior for the Imperium, but as the butcher of your own? Silence was the only reply from the Iron Decree. But across the Grol fleet, Rostova's words were a seismic charge, cracking the foundations of their rigid belief system. Sharma Rostova said in a low voice away from the broadcast pickup, "That kill signal. Is there anything at all irregular about it? Any fluctuation?" Sharma's fingers flew across her console, pushing her sensor suite to its absolute limits. "It's incredibly stable, Admiral. A perfect sine wave." But wait. She paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. There is a micro-stutter in the signal's propagation. Not in the signal itself, but in the way it leaves the ship. As if the final emitter is misaligned. Almost imperceptibly. This was it. The second mystery. The small, exploitable flaw. Like a heartbeat with a murmur, Rostova murmured. "Can you use the mirror lattice to interact with that stutter?" A gleam of understanding lit Sharma's eyes. "Theoretically. We can't block the signal, but we could use the drones to project a precisely timed resonance wave. Not to counter it, but to amplify the stutter. We could make the heartbeat skip. This is how we turn their strength into a flaw." "Do it," Rostova ordered. "On the broadcast for everyone to see." She turned back to her address. "Subjugator Kalen, you believe your control is absolute. Let me show you how fragile it is. The million drones of the mirror lattice, their first task complete, reoriented. They did not gather light this time. Instead, they projected a subtle, complex wave of resonance energy timed to the microsecond by Lieutenant Sharma. The wave converged on the hull of the Iron Decree. On the public broadcast, the icon representing the dead man's switch suddenly flickered. The steady rhythmic pulse wavered, then went erratic for a few seconds before stabilizing. It was a small thing, a momentary glitch, but its meaning was immense. It was proof that the unbreakable signal could be touched. It was proof that Kalen's control was not absolute. A single crack can bring down a mountain. Your final weapon is as flawed as your ultimatum. Rostova stated, her voice like ice. Stand down. Release your crews. Face the consequences of your actions with what honor you have left. Inside the Iron Decree subjugator, Kalen watched the broadcast, his scarred face a mask of disbelief and fury. The humans had not only defeated him tactically, they were dismantling his authority, his very identity, in front of the entire galaxy. He was a subjugator of the Grol Imperium. He did not surrender. He did not fail. The doctrine was clear. His hand moved towards a shielded console, the manual override for the scuttling sequence. If the broadcast signal was compromised, he would send the command directly. He's doing it! Lyceum's voice was stark. I am detecting a massive power surge to the override console on the Grol flagship's bridge. Lee slammed his fist on his console. We're out of time, No Rostova said, her eyes blazing. We are right on schedule. She had anticipated this. The final desperate act of a zealot. Commander Lee, that focused resonance beam we used on the Grol's fury. Can you replicate the frequency? Aye, Admiral. Ready and targeted. Lieutenant Sharma, on my mark, I want you to hit the flagship's transmitter with everything the lattice has. Create the biggest stutter you can. Ready, Admiral. Their own rigidity will be the hammer that breaks them. Mark, Rostova commanded. The mirror lattice pulsed again, sending a chaotic wave of interference that slammed into the kill signal's emitter. At the exact same moment, the ledger fired its resonance beam. It wasn't aimed to destroy, but to overload. The beam struck the flagship, and the interference from the lattice acted as a guide, funneling the resonance energy directly into the compromised emitter. The result was a cascade failure. The emitter, already struggling against the interference, tried to compensate for the resonance beam's energy. The feedback loop was instantaneous and catastrophic. On the bridge of the Iron Decree, the override console exploded in a shower of sparks. Kalen was thrown back, his uniform singed. The rhythmic pulse that had held 100,000 souls hostage vanished from the tactical display. The dead man's switch was broken. A silence deeper than the void fell across the system. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Grol fleet remained dark and silent. Then, one by one, the red icons on the main display began to change. A Grol cruiser, then a destroyer, then a dozen more began broadcasting standard surrender signals. Their reactors powered down. Their weapon ports, already inert, were sealed under formal surrender protocols. They had been freed. Not by a conqueror, but by an accountant who had shown them the true cost of their loyalty. Lee let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. They're standing down. The entire fleet. A wave of relief washed over the ledger's bridge, a silent, shared exhalation. The tension that had held them for nearly 2 days finally broke. The faint scent of ozone from the resonance beam's discharge lingered in the air. The ledger took a power surge from that final discharge, the engineering officer reported. We have blown conduits in the forward energy spine. Section Gamma is reporting minor heat damage. No casualties. Another cost accepted and logged. It was the price of holding to their principles. A small price for over 100,000 lives. We pay our debts in energy and steel, never in souls. Lyceum Rostova said, her voice quiet, but firm. Send a message to the Grol Imperium High Command and to the Galactic Council. Log this engagement in the public record. The Terran Mandate officially designates the Grol Ultimatum Doctrine and any similar mechanism of enforced self-destruction as a war crime perpetrated by a commander against their own crew. The precedent is now set. The ledger is balanced. On the screen, the flagship Iron Decree remained isolated and alone. Its master was now just a man in a broken room, his power undone. The rest of his fleet had chosen life. They had chosen a new calculation. Rostova watched as Mandate shuttles began the long, slow process of securing the surrendered Grol vessels. Her officers were managing the logistics with practiced calm, but she could see the pride in their bearing. They had not just won a battle. They had upheld an ideal. They had taught a lesson that would echo through the stars. The Grol had come to Eridani B to make an example of Viridian, and they had succeeded. The galaxy had watched them become an example of what happens when rigid doctrine confronts a species that answers ultimatums not with fear but with a mirror. The tactical display was now a sea of peaceful green and blue icons. The crimson threat was gone. Rostova ordered the mirror lattice to power down. Across millions of kilometers, a million tiny points of light extinguished their mirrored surfaces, cooling to a dull pewter in the faint starlight. She stood on her bridge, the quiet hum of her ship, a comforting reassurance. They had held the line. They had forced a choice where none was offered. True strength, she reflected, was not the power to deliver an ultimatum, but the discipline to absorb one and return a possibility in its place. It was the slow, difficult, and necessary work of teaching the darkness how to yield to the light. They learned that a mirror can be a shield, a lens, and a sword.